Pirates didn't just kill their enemies, they kept them alive on purpose. What they did instead made grown men beg for a quick death at sea. The most feared pirate punishment wasn't walking the plank or drowning. It was something so twisted that even hardened sailors would rather face sharks than endure it. When pirates captured your ship during the golden age of piracy, they didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. Well, unless that carpet was soaked in blood and tears. The moment you found yourself in their clutches, the real nightmare began. These weren't the charming rogues Hollywood makes them out to be. Pirates had a business to run, and fear was their most valuable currency. The faster they could break you, the quicker they'd get their hands on whatever treasure you were hiding. And trust me, they had some creative ways to loosen tongues. Charles Vane, one of the nastiest pirates to sail the Caribbean, turned torture into an art form. This madman would tie up his victims and introduce them to his favorite tool, fire. He'd hold burning torches close to prisoners' faces, singeing eyebrows and threatening worse. But Vane's specialty? Burning matches jammed right between captives' fingers. Picture having lit matches stuffed between your fingers like some twisted birthday cake. The sulfur would hiss and burn, scorching flesh and nerves until grown men screamed for mercy. The smell alone, burning sulfur mixed with charred skin, was enough to make other prisoners spill their secrets before their turn came. For most captured sailors, the torture started the second they stepped aboard a pirate vessel. No pleasantries, no welcome drink, just immediate pain designed to establish who was boss. Pirates knew that a few screams from the first victim would make everyone else much more cooperative. Smart pirates understood psychology better than most ship surgeons understood medicine. Why waste time searching every inch of a captured vessel when you could simply make the captain watch his crew suffer? Most men broke within minutes, revealing hidden compartments stuffed with gold coins or pointing out which passengers carried the fattest purses. The beauty of this system, if you can call torture beautiful, was its efficiency. Word spread faster than ship rats about which pirate crews were the most brutal. Soon, merchant vessels would surrender without firing a single shot rather than face the legendary cruelty of captains like Vane or Blackbeard. But here's where it gets really twisted. Pirates discovered that the anticipation of torture was sometimes more effective than torture itself. They'd let prisoners stew in their own terror, listening to screams echoing from below deck, knowing their turn was coming. Of course, burning fingers was just the appetizer on the pirate torture menu. When simple fire wasn't enough to break stubborn prisoners, these sea devils had plenty of other tricks up their sleeves, and some of those methods would make grown sailors beg for a quick death instead. After getting beaten and burned during interrogation, you might think the worst was over for captured sailors. Well, you'd be dead wrong. Pirates had a twisted sense of entertainment that made torture look like a warm-up act. Meet the Sweat, a sadistic game that turned the ship's deck into a deadly racetrack. Picture this madness. Captured crew members forced to run in circles around the main mast while bloodthirsty pirates jabbed at them with cutlasses, daggers, and whatever sharp objects they could grab. The faster you ran, the longer you lived. Slow down, get a blade in the ribs. But here's the truly sick part. This wasn't punishment for breaking rules or hiding treasure. Nope. Pirates did this purely for laughs. They'd gather around with their rum bottles, cheering and placing bets on which poor soul would collapse first. Think of it as the world's most brutal sporting event, except the athletes never volunteered to participate. The victim would sprint around that wooden pole, sweat pouring down their face, legs burning with exhaustion. Behind them, a pack of drunk pirates wielding steel, treating human suffering like their personal comedy show. The crew would howl with laughter every time someone stumbled or cried out in pain. Makes modern reality TV seem downright wholesome, doesn't it? What made The Sweat particularly terrifying was its randomness. Your social status meant absolutely nothing once those ropes hit your wrists. Ship captains, wealthy merchants, common sailors, everyone was fair game for this twisted marathon. A respected sea captain who'd sailed for decades could find himself running for his life, while pirates half his age mocked his every desperate step. The psychological damage often lasted longer than the physical wounds. Survivors described the sound of boots pounding on wet deck boards, the metallic scrape of blades, and worst of all, the constant laughter. That haunting mixture of terror and humiliation broke men's spirits faster than any whip. Then there's the cruel efficiency of it all. Pirates discovered that public humiliation sent a crystal-clear message to anyone watching. Resist us, and you'll become our entertainment. Word spread quickly through maritime communities about these horrific spectacles, making future victims more likely to surrender without a fight. The smartest pirates knew that fear was their most valuable weapon. Why waste time fighting stubborn crews when you could simply demonstrate what happened to the last group of heroes who tried to resist? But running until you dropped was nothing compared to what came next. Some punishments made the sweat look like a pleasant morning jog. If you thought regular torture was bad, wait until you hear about keelhauling. This wasn't just painful, it was basically a death sentence with a twisted sense of hope attached. Here's how this nightmare worked. Pirates would tie thick ropes around a victim's wrists and ankles, then drag them under the entire length of the ship. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, here's the catch that made sailors wake up screaming. Ship hulls back then weren't smooth like modern boats. They were covered in barnacles, razor-sharp shells that grew like underwater razors along every inch of the keel. Think of it as being dragged across a cheese grater the size of a small building, except you're also drowning. The victim got pulled down one side, scraped along the bottom, then hauled up the other side. If they were lucky, the whole ordeal lasted maybe 30 seconds. Lucky being a relative term here. Most people didn't survive their first keel hauling. The barnacles shredded skin, muscle, and clothing into bloody ribbons. Those unlucky enough to live through it looked like they'd been mauled by a giant underwater cat. Deep cuts covered their bodies from head to toe, but drowning was often the merciful way out. Many victims simply couldn't hold their breath long enough and filled their lungs with seawater halfway through. Pirates sometimes showed kindness by attaching weights to make the dragging faster. Isn't that thoughtful? The few survivors faced another horror: infection. Remember, this was the 16 and 1700s. No antibiotics, no proper medical care, and certainly no sterile conditions aboard a pirate ship. Those gaping wounds collected salt, dirt, and every nasty bacteria floating in the ocean. Captain Kidd's crew was known to keelhaul prisoners just to watch other captives break down. Nothing motivated cooperation quite like watching someone get turned into human chum. Even seasoned pirates feared this punishment. Smart captains used keelhauling as their ultimate threat because everyone knew the odds of survival were practically zero. The sight of those barnacle-covered hulls became a constant reminder of what happened to troublemakers. Pirates didn't just pick this method randomly. They chose it because witnesses never forgot what they saw. The screaming, the blood in the water, the mangled bodies. It was psychological warfare at its most effective. Then there's the really twisted part. Sometimes pirates would keelhaul the same person multiple times if they somehow survived the first round. But that brings us to another form of pirate creativity that focused on permanent reminders rather than quick deaths. Pirates had their own twisted idea of body modification, and it wasn't for fashion. When they wanted to send a message that would stick, they literally carved it into their victims. We're talking about deliberate mutilation that made torture look like a warm-up act. Edward Lowe stands out as the absolute worst when it comes to creative cruelty. This maniac once captured a Portuguese captain who had the nerve to hide his ship's money by throwing it overboard. Lowe's response? He sliced off the captain's lips with a cutlass and forced him to eat them while they were still bleeding. Then, just to add insult to very literal injury, Lowe had the poor man roasted alive over a fire. But Lowe wasn't working alone in the nightmare department. Pirates regularly chopped off ears, noses, fingers, and whatever else caught their fancy that day. Think of it as permanent reminder service, except nobody asked for the subscription. The whole point wasn't just sadism, though. That played a big part. Smart pirates knew that a captain missing his nose would sail back to port and tell everyone exactly what happened. Word spread faster than wildfire through the Caribbean shipping community. One mutilated survivor could terrorize 100 other crews without pirates lifting another finger. Some crews got creative with their knife work. They'd carve initials or symbols into victims' foreheads, literally branding people like cattle. Others preferred removing tongues, which served the double purpose of causing agony and ensuring the victim could never testify against them later. Well, here's where it gets even more twisted. Pirates discovered that partial mutilation worked better than killing people outright. A dead man tells no tales, but a living man, missing half his face, that guy becomes a walking advertisement for pirate brutality. The psychological damage often proved worse than the physical wounds. Survivors faced a lifetime of stares, whispers, and constant reminders of their ordeal. Many wished the pirates had simply killed them instead of turning them into living horror stories. Makes you appreciate modern workplace complaints, right? Your boss might be difficult, but at least he's not threatening to make you eat your own body parts. Then there were the lucky ones who only lost fingers or toes. Pirates considered this merciful, a gentle warning compared to what they could do. But even these minor mutilations often led to deadly infections in an age before antibiotics. However, cutting and carving weren't the only tools in the pirate punishment playbook. Sometimes they preferred methods that left no permanent marks but caused just as much agony. The cat o' nine tails wasn't some friendly ship mascot. This whip had 9 separate leather strips, each one ready to tear flesh from bone. Pirates loved this particular torture device because it combined efficiency with pure sadistic entertainment. Well, here's the thing about flogging. It wasn't just punishment. Pirates turned it into theater. They'd gather the crew on deck, break out the rum, and make a whole production of it. The victim got tied to the mast while everyone else placed bets on how many lashes they could survive. But the standard cat wasn't brutal enough for some crews. These creative sadists would modify their whips by tying fish hooks to the ends of each strip. Others preferred musket balls, those heavy lead spheres that would slam into flesh before the leather strips followed. Makes your worst boss seem pretty reasonable, right? Captain Bartholomew Roberts' crew once flogged a merchant captain so severely that his back looked like raw hamburger. The poor man survived, but spent weeks face down in a hammock, unable to wear a shirt. His crew watched every second of it, knowing they could be next if they didn't cooperate completely. Then there were the marathon flogging sessions. Some pirates wouldn't stop at 20 or 30 lashes. They'd keep going until their arm got tired, take a rum break, then hand the cat to someone fresh. I've read accounts of men receiving over 100 lashes and somehow living to tell about it. The psychological damage often exceeded the physical wounds. Survivors described nightmares about the whistling sound the cat made cutting through air. That distinctive crack when leather met skin haunted them for years. Smart captains would surrender their cargo the moment they spotted that dreaded whip coming out. And the weird part is, pirates considered flogging almost merciful compared to their other options. At least you knew it would eventually end. The scars might never fade, but you'd walk away alive if your heart didn't give out first. Some crews developed special techniques to maximize suffering. They'd space the lashes out over days, letting wounds partially heal before reopening them. Others preferred the rapid-fire approach. Get it over with quickly, but make each strike count double. The cat o' nine tails became so notorious that merchant ships started surrendering the moment pirates displayed one. Nobody wanted to test their pain tolerance against 9 strips of modified leather, but even the most brutal flogging paled compared to what came next for the truly unlucky prisoners. Getting clapped in irons wasn't just about being chained up. It was about slow, methodical destruction of the human spirit. Pirates knew that sometimes the most effective torture didn't involve fire or blades. It required patience. Picture heavy iron shackles clamped around your wrists and ankles. The metal rubbed constantly against bone, creating open wounds that never healed properly. These weren't the neat handcuffs you see in movies. We're talking about crude, rusted iron that weighed enough to make every movement exhausting. But here's where it gets really nasty. Pirates often added iron collars, basically metal necklaces from hell. These contraptions pressed against the throat and spine, making it nearly impossible to find a comfortable position. Try sleeping with a 20-pound weight around your neck sometime. Actually, don't. The real genius of this torture was the waiting. Prisoners got shoved into the darkest corners of ships, often below deck where rats were your only company. And those rats, they weren't particularly friendly roommates. Food came maybe once a day, usually moldy bread and water that tasted like it came from a horse trough. The portions were deliberately small. Pirates wanted their captives weak but alive. Dead prisoners couldn't reveal where treasure was buried or provide information about other ships. Then there's the psychological warfare aspect. Complete darkness messes with your mind faster than you'd think. Without sunlight or any way to track time, prisoners lost all sense of reality. Some started talking to themselves within days. Others began seeing things that weren't there. The chains made everything worse. Need to scratch an itch? Too bad. Want to stretch your legs? Not happening. Even basic human functions became exercises in humiliation and pain. Pirates designed this specifically to break people mentally before their bodies gave out. What's particularly cruel is that escape was theoretically possible, but practically impossible. Those iron shackles were heavy enough that even if you broke free, swimming to safety while wearing them meant certain drowning. Pirates loved this psychological trick. Hope, but no real chance. Some captives lasted weeks in these conditions. Others broke within days, begging to reveal whatever secrets the pirates wanted. The smart ones talked early and often. Pride was a luxury nobody could afford when facing indefinite darkness and starvation. But even broken prisoners weren't guaranteed mercy. Sometimes pirates kept them chained simply for entertainment value, watching strong men reduced to whimpering shadows of themselves. Speaking of entertainment, pirates had even more creative ways to destroy their enemies' will to live. Getting killed quickly was actually a mercy in the pirate world. The real nightmare? Getting marooned. Pirates would dump you on some godforsaken patch of sand in the middle of nowhere and sail away, leaving you to figure out how to survive with basically nothing. Here's the twisted part. They weren't completely heartless about it. Most maroon victims got exactly one pistol with one bullet. Sounds generous until you realize what that bullet was really for. When the hunger got too bad, when the sun cooked your brain, when you started talking to crabs like old drinking buddies, you had an escape route. One shot. Make it count. The psychological torture was worse than any physical beating. Imagine watching that pirate ship disappear over the horizon, knowing you're completely alone. No rescue ships patrol these waters, no passing merchants, just you, some seabirds, and whatever crabs decide to investigate your eventual corpse. Dehydration hit first. Your tongue would swell up like a dried sponge, and hallucinations started dancing around day 3 or 4. Some survivors reported having full conversations with deceased relatives. Others started building elaborate sandcastles, convinced they were constructing their way home. But here's what made marooning so effective as a threat. The stories got back. Occasionally, maybe 1 in 50, someone survived long enough for rescue. They'd return to port looking like walking skeletons, babbling about eating seaweed and drinking their own... Well, you get the picture. These living warnings were worth more than any wanted poster. Captain Kidd's crew once marooned a quartermaster who'd been skimming from their shares. The man lasted 6 months on a tiny Caribbean island before a Spanish fishing boat found him. He'd lost 60 pounds and couldn't stop his hands from shaking. Word spread fast through every tavern from Port Royal to Nassau. Pirates used marooning on their own crew members too. Mutiny against the captain, marooning, steal from your shipmates, sand vacation time, refuse to follow the pirate code, pack light, you're not coming back. The beauty of this punishment was its simplicity. No elaborate torture devices needed. Just find the nearest uninhabited rock and drop off your problem. Mother Nature handled the rest, slowly and thoroughly. Even hardened pirates feared marooning more than hanging. A noose meant 30 seconds of suffering, then nothing. Marooning meant weeks of gradual madness, your mind breaking before your body finally gave up. Speaking of breaking minds and bodies, pirates had other creative ways to make examples of people. Sometimes they preferred keeping victims alive for everyone to see, turning punishment into a public spectacle that could be viewed for miles. Pirates understood something modern marketers would kill for: the power of visual branding. But instead of flashy billboards, they used rotting corpses. When authorities finally caught pirates, they didn't just execute them and call it a day. Oh no, that would be far too civilized. They stuffed the bodies into iron cages called gibbets and hung them at harbor entrances like the world's most terrifying welcome signs. These cages were custom-fitted torture devices that kept the corpse upright even as it decomposed. The location mattered as much as the method. Pirates' bodies swayed from prominent points where every sailor entering port had to see them. Execution Dock in London became famous for these displays. Ships would pass directly underneath dangling pirates, and captains would point them out to their crews. See that fellow? He thought piracy was a good career choice. But here's where it gets particularly grim. Some pirates were still alive when they went into the cages. They'd hang there for days, slowly dying of thirst while seabirds pecked at them. The lucky ones died quickly from their wounds or the elements. The unlucky ones? Well, let's just say it wasn't a dignified way to go. These displays served multiple purposes beyond simple punishment. They were advertisements, really. Every merchant ship that saw a gibbet got the message loud and clear. This is what happens to pirates. The visual was far more effective than any wanted poster or proclamation. The cages themselves were works of dark craftsmanship. Blacksmiths shaped them to fit individual bodies, with metal bands holding the skull, ribs, and limbs in place. As the flesh rotted away, and believe me, it did so spectacularly in the salty sea air, the bones would rattle like a macabre wind chime. Pirates feared gibbeting more than a quick death by hanging. Captain Kidd's body hung in chains for 3 years at Tilbury Point. 3 years of weather, birds, and decay, turning him into a skeleton that still somehow managed to look accusatory to passing ships. The psychological impact was enormous. These weren't just dead pirates. They were permanent reminders that the golden age of piracy came with a very specific retirement plan. And it wasn't pretty. Port authorities loved the system because it required zero maintenance. Nature handled the decomposition. The elements provided the special effects, and gravity kept everything in place. It was the perfect low-budget deterrent program. The message was crystal clear. Choose piracy, and you might end up as harbor decoration for years to come.